New day, new updates on the Tacoma solid axle swap. Today I kind of wanted to work on swapping the dipstick tube in the oil pan. Original dipstick right here runs down to the front of the block right down there. I've got one that's OEM. Basically it's the stuff that comes out of a T100 two-wheel drive with the 3.4. I've got all the OEM parts. It's got the little press-in, whatever you want to call it. Press-in receiver for the dipstick guide. Got an O-ring on there. So to go on there, I also have a oil pan from a junkyard. I got it for like 15 bucks. Got the pickup tube to go with it. So all that stuff is supposed to swap in. However, I do need to get the old dipstick out, drill and tap, well mostly tap, that part right down in there where the, see if I zoom in a little bit, where that dipstick tube goes in, and put a natural pipe thread plug in it. So I need to get to that. So to do so, pull the radiator out, fan, thermostat cover, lower and upper hoses out, give me a lot more working room. And then underneath, I unplugged what I think right here. This there's a wire floating here that was plugged in right there. I think that's crank position sensor. I unhooked the wiring loom so I can get to the bottom of the pan, because that's, once you start drilling this out, I'm going to get a magnet underneath and try to catch the shavings so I don't make a mess of the insides. And then once that one is plugged, the hard part to see, give me a second, let me get a light. There's a boss on the engine block. Man, this is going to be really hard for you to see. This might work. Yeah, there you go. That little boss right there, you drill down from the top, and that's where your new dipstick's going to go. But of course I can't drill that with the motor mount in the way. Motor mount, coolant line, wiring harness and stuff, so I'll end up pulling a bolt right, boy, this is a little too bright for you, that's alright. I'll end up pulling this bolt out to get this wiring kind of loom loose. There's another one back right about there, there's a bolt that'll loosen up this loom. And I'm going to end up pulling the motor mount, and I'm going to support the, probably from the bottom of the bell housing, I'll end up supporting the transmission, probably right about there. Pick it all up, get the motor mount out of the way, see if I can get these coolant lines out of the way. And I've got a, just went to Harbor Freight, picked up one of these, what do you call it, reversible air angle drill. It's kind of got a short head on it, so even with like a, whatever that is, eighth inch drill bit on it, it's pretty short and stubby, so should be able to get this in there, get the hole drilled. Whenever that time comes, I'll be walking you guys through how to do that. Alright, trying to get this dipstick swapped. We haven't pulled the pan yet. We took the bolt out up here that holds the dipstick tube in, and then it's pretty good tug and you can pull this out of there. We intend to drill and tap that hole down there for, I think it's an M10 by 1.5, at least that's what I saw online, somebody else did. So we'll drill and tap that, use an RTV or a sealant, and put a bolt in there to seal that off. As for the new dipstick, we pulled the motor mount out, got the trans pans supported with some wood blocks, pulled the motor mount out, zip tied harness up out of the way. Coolant lines kind of can move. You do have to pull the oil filter off to get that bolt back there for the motor mount. But essentially, to do, man, the lighting sucks. It's gonna suck. There's a boss coming off the engine right there. You can see it well with my finger in the way. That's gonna get drilled and tapped perpendicular to that face. So we're basically running it in at the same angle that that boss is sticking out. We're going to drill that out to 3/8, and then we'll end up tapping in. Where's my dipstick? The new one. Oh God! Oh, I'm done. We're going to drill that out to 3/8 and tap in this little fitting right here. This and this tube separate. There's no ring in there, so we're going to press this in there, and I think 3/8 is the right size. I'll double check it with the caliper, but basically, drill out that boss and tap this in. I'm going to pull the oil pan before I drill that because I want to be sure that no shavings get down inside down in the pan. It won't matter because I'm swapping the pan, but I do want to just feel more comfortable seeing that all the shavings, nothing's like floating around stuck inside the inside walls of the block or anything by accident. So Next step is going to be pulling the pan for us and making sure that thing's clean and I can get a center punch in it to make sure I'm started right and go from there. Underneath the truck now, fixing to drop the oil pan. It's going to be a little tough to see, sorry about the lighting. The first thing on the front is that there's a wiring loom right about here. Has two 10mm M8 bolts that go in at the front. Take those out of the way. That'll allow you to get up through the bottom and get the bolts there. But before you can get these back ones at the trans, you got four, although I'm missing one, you got four 12mm head bolts that need to come out to get this inspection cover off. Then you can get to all the bolts around it, and they're all going to be 10mm. And that's what I'm going to work on now. Probably got to get that side. Thing's got at least one alignment bolt, maybe two. Oof. It doesn't fit well. There it is. Let's just go out. People want to pull and delete the ladder. Not with this looking at me. It's going. Alright, it's a new day. Trying to pick up where I left off last night. Finishing off the oil pan swap. Where I left off, I may not have got a lot of great footage last night, but I'll pick up where I left off. Finished drilling out this boss here on the block and inserted the little fitting for the bottom of the dipstick tube. I will make a warning now. I didn't have the drill guide that you can get for these, and I didn't lean it out far enough at the top, so wherever mine comes through, it's still kind of coming out on the bottom of the block, the bottom, like, mating surface where the pan goes. Not super ideal. I'll see if the dipstick still fits. I may have to, like, slightly dent the pan, which is kind of ghetto, and I'm aware it's ghetto. I'm not pleased with it, but like I said, I kind of cheaped out and didn't get the guide, so definitely get the guide in the future. Plus, me hand drilling it, this ended up just being a little bit too big, so definitely step up in your drill bit sizes one at a time. And maybe stop early. It's supposed to be a size U bit, which is about the same as a 3/8. So maybe stop, you know, a 64th smaller, or you know, an 1/8 smaller, or something like, or what would that be? Yeah, 32nd or a 64th smaller than 3/8, and try test fitting it first. It should kind of press in, just like with a hammer, you know, a block of wood and a hammer. You should be able to tap that in. It'll probably work. I don't expect to have any issues. And then with the top one, I drilled it for an M10 by 1.25. Have a lot of those bolts laying around. Well, I didn't even have to drill it, excuse me. I just tapped it. Had a tap, had bolts for that. Double checked the depth of the bolt after I put it in there. So I just kind of coated it in black, ultra black RTV, and tightened it in there and just kind of made sure that the RTV on the bottom of the pan was, you know, flat and flush, not going to cause any problems. And then I just threw the pan on it last night for, you know, overnight. So, still got the new guide tube that has to go in. But before I can put that in, I've got to put the motor mount back on. This is basically how it sits on the engine. And that dipstick tube will fall right through the center of this hole. So I actually need to put that back on first. I've still got the engine trans supported, so I'm just going to go ahead and fit this guy back up in there and get it bolted to the block, and then I'll be putting the dipstick tube in. Alright, got the motor mount in. Got 1, 2, and 3 bolts installed. Still got to do these 2 lower ones when I drop it down. To get that motor mount out, to get in that bolt, it's a lot easier to just pull the oil filter off. So that's not a big deal. It takes a couple seconds. Of course, I'm trying to put it back as quickly as I can to make sure there's no dirt or anything. I try to put the oil filter back in though as quickly as possible, as I don't want to get any contaminants in where the filter goes. Ignore the tape. I punched a hole in it by accident. I'll change it before I ever start this thing, so not worried about it. But I just try to put it back on for safekeeping. I'll go ahead and lower the engine down so I can get these two lower bolts in. See if I can get it to go slow. Nice and easy. Alright, got the two other bolts. I'm going to go ahead and throw those in and tighten them down. Got these two bolts tightened. Ran them facing inward, same way factory had them, not that it really matters. And pressure off of the trans. So, next I'm going to get back underneath of it and, no, I take it back. Actually, next thing I'm going to do is take that dipstick and drop it down through here. Now it starts to become hard to see. Oh man, this is tough to see. The little adapter for the dipstick tube, like I said, is right behind the motor mount, so it's going to feed through that hole I showed in the motor mount earlier, and it's going to go right into there. Dipstick guide in. It's really tight. I don't really know what's going on. It's like, it could be because of my drill being off, but in reality I can see back there that it's touching that side of that hole. So I'm not really sure what's going on with that. I don't think it's going to be a problem. It's very hard to see, and I apologize. But that tube is hitting the side of that. Yeah, you can see it right there. It's hitting the side of that motor mount hole. It is in the guide. As you can see right there, it is in there, and it seems to be seated all the way down. It's really tight, and it bolts in those two bolts up here. So I can kind of push them and get them to line up. Bracket's got a little bit of flex in it, but it's really tight. It's touching the back of the alternator. If I push it, it'll come off, but I think it's where it needs to go. So I'm going to try to throw the two bolts back in it and see if everything will kind of sit where it's supposed to go. Two bolts in. I got it to pull away from it. It's you know, it's got some space behind the alternator. Not touching it. Like I said, still touching back there at the motor mount. But, yeah, not much I can do about that, I don't think. Might be able to take like a short pry bar and just kind of give it a little space, maybe. But even that, I'm not think it's going to do much. I tried fitting the old oil pan just for giggles, and it doesn't seem like this stick is running into the edge of the lip of the pan. But where it passes through on this pan is like right here, which is pretty shallow, and it was sticking out a little bit. So I suspect that it was running in. In fact, I'm thinking that's what that tiny little chip is right there. I think it was hitting there and it couldn't go any farther. While the new pan being rear sump, they're kind of opposite each other right now. Front sump, rear sump. That dipstick should come out right between bolt 1, 2, 3 and 4, so it should come out right about here. And it looks like it's going to pass through. But before I set this up on there to test it, I came down here. I'm going to start scraping all the old RTV and stuff off and get it cleaned up. So kind of messy. Gonna kind of put the phone down so I can go ahead and finish this up, and then I'll try to see if I can get the pan to fit with the new dipstick. Got the rear sump, just 2 bolts holding it on, one on each side. Got it pressed up against the block. No sealant or anything. So now we'll push the dipstick down, and man, it's snug, but I think it's because it's these rubber pieces up top. Maybe I should put some oil on that and see if it'll slip in easier. Put a little bit of oil on the rubber portion at the top. So now we push this in here, see if it drops in. Perfect. Nice and easy now. There's a little bit of dry rubber from the factory, never been lubricated. Sounds like it bumps the pan just a little bit at the bottom. Hopefully it won't be a problem with reading it, but truth be told, this is where I'm at now. It does go in. So now I just got to worry about the windage tray and the pickup tube. Being said, I have two windage trays. Here it is. Oh, losing my stuff. This is the one I came out of the truck, like last night when I pulled it. And this is the one out of a T100 two-wheel drive from a junkyard. They are identical. So I'm going to just set one in there. Probably this one because it's cleaner. This one's already got oil on it, so all the metal attracted to it. So I'll probably take this one, throw it up in there, and then test fit my rear sump pickup. As you can see, they are indeed very different. Also, I'm going to have to make a new gasket for the rear sump here. I've got some gasket paper, so I'll just go ahead and trace that out and cut it. But for now, I'm just going to dry fit everything. I'm going to dry fit this. I'm going to dry fit this windage tray and see if everything fits. I've heard some stuff about maybe having to trim one of these, but I don't think that's going to happen on this model because this all came out of the same engine. I think it had something to do with the 3 liter that came in the 3 liter V6 that came in the earlier generation. Something about its windage tray was real tall, and you'd have to cut out the corner to fit the edge of the pickup tube. But anyways, let me go ahead and drop the pan again, throw this stuff in there, see if everything fits dry, and if that's the case, I'll pull it back out and make a gasket, but we'll check it first. Alright, test fitted the windage tray. Didn't expect to have any issues because it looked identical. Blew it off with some brake cleaner real quick first, make sure there's no crap on it, schmoo. So, I think it's incorrectly mounted at the moment, but you can see, front of it goes right on just fine. I got that nut on incorrectly, but everything fits, you know, clearances as it should. No issues, so to speak. So I think I'm going to go ahead and take this guy off and trace a gasket for that. Throw the bolts, bolt in there, that nut there, tighten those down. And obviously it's a nut in the back and a bolt in the back here to hold these on, and 2 nuts in the front. So I'll go ahead and make that gasket, show you that on the bench. That's not really a big deal. Got this thing traced on the paper, cut it out with the scissors. Mark the center hole with a socket. Did my best to eyeball center, just kind of based on the curvature of the outside. It will fit fine. It won't have any problems. Cut it out with scissors. Pencil obviously to mark it. Tip that I've always found: if you're doing M6 bolts, which are pretty common, that's basically anything with a 10mm head on a Toyota or any foreign model. A regular old like 3-hole punch style hole puncher here is perfect for the bolt hole size. I mean, it makes for a great hole size. It might be a little under, but I mean it'll go on fine. It works great. So, little tip there. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and take this, throw it on there, and bolt this pickup tube and the windage tray on the bottom. Got the bolts at the pickup tube tightened, support brackets, and the windage tray is all bolted in. I believe torque spec's about 66 inch-pounds. I just went snug. Snug is about right. I've done wrenching long enough to know about the feel of these. So, everything's good. Dipstick tube looks good. Comes down to the block as it should. No problems getting it in or out. So, everything's good. Just need to do a final cleanup on the oil pan and RTV this thing on. Just got them all snugged down just by hand. I'm going to give it about an hour, and then I'm going to come back and give them their final tightening. So, and during work tomorrow, they'll set up and cure. Use that Permatex Ultra Black. So I think it takes about 24 hours to fully cure. Not a big deal. And then I can start working on the next thing. Alright, I waited about an hour after finger tightening the bolts. Let that RTV set up a little bit. Then I came out here and tightened them all down. All the way around. After that, put the 2 bolts back in the front. One you can see about that bolt back there. That bolt back there holds this wiring harness loom back in. Redid that. On this side, hook the starter bolt, the starter lead back up, as well as the signal wire for the starter, because those are kind of hooked to that loom, had them unclipped. And lastly, put the inspection cover back on. With this rear sump oil pan, I did find out that that bolt down there, the lower one, right there, I'm sorry for the lighting, that bolt I can't get back in. It's not, you can't thread it from the back and put a nut on it. I probably could drill it out if I wanted, but it's just an inspection cover. I just put 3 of the bolts back in. I think it'll be fine. Have not refilled it with oil. I'll do that probably in a few days. Not in any hurry, but this is going to conclude this portion of this project, getting the oil pan dipstick swapped. So hopefully in the next one I'll be moving on to something else. I'm going to go ahead real quick and put that thermostat housing cover back on. It is dripping a little bit. But other than that, this is going to conclude the oil swap portion of this project. I think the next thing I'm going to do is just going to be a bunch more grinding. I may or may not do another video portion on that. So, until the next one.